sex of adults with children is both child abuse and criminal.
I agree.
The American Religious Town Hall meeting is now in session.
Welcome, friends, to the American Religious Town Hall meeting, where the discussion of religious, political, and social issues is meant to promote the cause of religious freedom and to help us better understand each other. And now, here's your host and moderator, Pastor Jerry Lutz.
Thank you so much, Mark. And I, too, would like to welcome everyone to today's program. Looking forward to having you with us today. We have a great panel assembled here, so before we begin, I'd like for you to meet each one. So let's begin with the gentleman to my right.
I'm John Robert Skeldon, a priest of the Diocese of Fort Worth, serving at St. Patrick's Cathedral in downtown Fort Worth.
I'm Rabbi Jordan Offsire, a retired rabbi living in the Palm Springs area of California, continuing to teach and to lead life cycle events in my community.
My name is John Peterson. I'm an Episcopal canon in the Episcopal Diocese of Washington.
I live not very far from where the canon used to have his activities in Washington, D.C. I live in Silver Spring, Maryland. I worked for several decades at the world headquarters of the Seventh-day Adventist Church.
My name is Mel Robeck. I'm professor of church history and ecumenics at Fuller Theological Seminary in Pasadena, California, and I'm an ordained minister with the Assemblies of God.
Hi, I'm Carl Trovall, Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences at Concordia University in Austin, Texas, a university affiliated with the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod.
All right, thank you everyone for being here today. And for this particular subject, I didn't hear much disagreement in the opening statements, and I think it's going to be obvious as to why that's the case. But let's get right into our discussion today. For millennia, societies in all parts of the world have usually developed and upheld a sexual morality that imposed more or less strong laws upholding what was permitted and what was seen as immoral. Sexual activity was generally tied to marriage, and children were generally protected. As is well known, the legal or religious standard was not always followed, and aberrant behavior was allowed or winked at as individuals followed less rigid or lower moral standards of their own. This is still the case today. In fact, it is clear that today's standards of sexual morality are increasingly what some call more tolerant, and others will call simply a decline of high moral standards. It can be said that there has continued to be growing standards of protection of children in regards to child sexual abuse, both in the home and society in general. It is a crime to produce child pornography, distribute, or even have it on a computer at home. And yet teachers and even clergy have been caught in significant numbers and sent to prison for underage child sexual abuse. We are now even faced with proponents advocating the legitimacy of adult-child sexual relations. Today, I would like our panelists to consider this subject with these three questions in mind. First, is there a development favoring opening the moral door to adult-child sexual relations? The next question, is there a significant moral fall in America that weakens and puts in danger of collapse the wall of childhood protection from sexual abuse? And the third question, is there in most countries, including America, a growing weakness and decadence in sexual morality that puts in danger the innocence and protection of children? It's a very sobering, somber discussion we're going to have today. And as I said, we didn't hear much disagreement between those who opened the program with their opening statements. But let's go back to them now and ask them to elaborate on their thoughts on this important subject. Let's go back to Rabbi Offsire. Welcome back to the program today, and thank you for your opening statement. Tell us a little more what you think about this.
I think that it's very sad that there is an active interest in even the possibility of sexual relations between children and adults. The fact that child pornography is against the law, and the fact that there have been some that have been arrested for involving sexual relations with children is no reason nearly sufficient to cause us to break that solid wall of separating sexuality with not children in any way, of separating sexuality with adults who choose to participate in sexual relations one with the other.
All right, thank you very much. Now let's return to Father Skeldon. And your statement was quite succinct and quite to the point. If you could tell us a little more of your thoughts on the subject, please.
Yeah, it's obvious that sex outside of consenting adults, you know, in particular with sex between adults and children, is abhorrent. I from a church that, of course, has been in a lot of press about that, with clergy and others that have fallen short over the years, you know, egregiously so, and it must be, you know, condemned. And as such, I think in some ways, you know, sometimes I've talked to people, well, you know, it's sort of unfair that the Catholic Church is sort of pointed out. And sometimes I would say, no, you know what, actually, right now it's probably the best thing that we're on the cross for this, because in some sense it then will focus a light to this reality that goes, even as we know, well beyond the church and into people's homes and lives. And I've heard it numerous times, the abuse that they had endured as children from other family members, things like that, but it was all sort of hushed away and put under the carpet, so to speak. So in a sense, to be able to be that sort of sacrificial victim, if you will, the church institutionally speaking, and to shed that light, that necessary light, that sunlight that will, you know, bring to light the corruption, the abuse, the scandal. I think it's an important thing, because in the end, what happens with honesty and truth and sincerity and authenticity is hopefully healing and protection, and in particular for those who are vulnerable, those vulnerable adults and children.
All right, thank you very much. We're off to a good start here then. Dr. Trovall, welcome to the program
Thank you.
today. Your thoughts on the subject, if you would, please.
I think that it would be probably a good question to ask why it's been so universally condemned, this behavior of sex between adults and children. And I think it fundamentally is, you use the word protection, that the obligation of a parent to a child, of an adult to a child, particularly people who are in roles like clergy or teachers especially, but really everyone, their obligation is one of protection. And to abuse that power relationship is really an abuse and an invasion on the personhood of the other person, which has terrible, terrible repercussions on a child. And you assume that everyone knows that, but it's something that I really wanted to bring out. I think, you know, going in a little bit different direction, I was wondering, well, how are we defining child? Because you know, I always heard that Mary and Joseph. Mary was very young when she had virgin birth, what we would call now an adolescent. And of course, our age and our culture is 18, but I mean, many cultures have had, I mean, the minute you hit kind of biological maturity to reproduce, it's marriageable age, and hence the openness to sexuality. And so that's one question that I had as we were wrestling with this. How are we defining what? Because I mean, to me, a child is someone just prepubescent, 2 to 10, maybe, but I'll just leave it at that.
All right, thank you, Dr. Trovall. Let's come across the table. Canon Peterson, welcome to the program. Your thoughts on the subject, please.
Yes. The problem of sexual abuse of children in the United States is indeed staggering. For that matter, there are only 4 countries in the world that have a higher rate of sexual abuse of children than the United States: South Africa, India, Zimbabwe, and the UK. And what and then fifth, of course, is the United States. I suspect that one can somewhat explain away both South Africa and Zimbabwe, because in those two countries, the HIV/AIDS rate is so high, and one of the myths in relationship to HIV and AIDS is that a man infected with HIV/AIDS can be pure. He can be healed. Excuse me. Can be healed if he has sex with a young virgin. And consequently, that is, I think, one of the reasons why the statistics in relationship to South Africa and Zimbabwe are so high. But what is staggering about all this, and I've used the word staggering twice, is that the majority of cases, 90% of the cases of sex between an adult and a child, the victims know their abusers. The abusers are usually neighbors, friends, or family members. About 60% of the children who are sexually abused and abused by people that the family actually trusts. Homosexual individuals are no more likely to have sexual activity or sexually abuse a child than a heterosexual individual. So we have a real problem here, that it is the intimacy of the family or family friends who are involved in this type of perpetration. And to think that 90%, it raises indeed enormous questions in relationship to family units and structures, the church, any other social structures that we have in the community today.
All right, thank you very much. Across the table, Dr. Beach, welcome to the program.
I think what has been said highlights not only the problem, but the wider spread of the problem. It is a real problem, I think. And I think one thing that the government tries to do illegally, I think, when it has adults also, it also goes beyond that a little bit, in the sense that they don't want somebody who is very powerful, the boss, let's say, and then has an intern or somebody on a very low level but is beyond 18, so is an adult. That is considered also a form of sexual abuse. And I think it's wise to do that. And we sometimes forget about it. We just think, oh, the child is over 18, forgets everything and nothing else. But I think what happens, the protection should be with the concept that sex is between people of equal authority, so to speak. Equality. And there should not be between somebody very powerful, older, or whatever, or rich, and somebody just a little intern or something. And then that person is of age, so there's no abuse. Yes, there is abuse. In other words, sex is between people of equality as much as possible.
Rabbi Officer, and then we'll come down to Dr. Robeck.
Yes, I'd like us to remember that, if no one else, the women's movement has taught us that in the beginning of this century and for decades, women were very, very helpless at the hands of those more powerful than they, and I don't mean physically, but more powerful with regard to being the boss or being someone who has control over them. And at the heart of all of this is the issue that we've alluded to, but I think we need to be much more clear, that what we are speaking about is equality when it comes to sex, that each of the partners or each of the participants are those that have choices and are able to make them maturely and are able to make them of their own free will. That's what consenting adults mean, and a child is unable to act as a consenting adult.
Right.
All right, thank you very much. Now, Dr. Robeck, glad to have you back on the program.
Well,
Your thoughts?
thank you. In many respects, everything that could be said has been said at this table already. All I'm going to do is put an exclamation point at the end of it and say, I agree. That being said, let me tell you what my church would say, in a sense. What we argue is that all sexual relationships are a gift from God. And they are intended to be used between a man and a woman in a marriage covenant that brings them together for, hopefully, the production of children. Okay? That when you go outside of that, whether it's premarital, extramarital, adulterous, fornication, same-sex, all of that, that's illicit when it comes to understanding what sex and sexuality is about. And I would have to say that in terms of that, we're not talking about adult children. We're talking about adults. We have to be talking about adults. They have to consent, otherwise it's rape. Or it cannot have this power differential or any other kind of differential, as far as I can tell. There are cultures, and I want to ask my brother Cannon here about Muslim cultures, where we hear in the news quite frequently a 10, 11, 12-year-old girl being betrothed to a 65-year-old man, and so forth. That is a very different issue. I don't know quite what to say. But what I would say is that that's not the intent. And there are far too many people that are being abused. I have a brother who would claim over and over again that it was people in the church that abused him, which led him to be the way he is today. He's not personally an abuser, but he lives in a gay lifestyle, and it's a very hard one that he's lived. So these kinds of things are extremely difficult. There's no simple answer other than to say I would condemn any person who takes advantage of a person for purposes of sex, period.
All right, thank you. Kenneth Peterson, did you want to respond to that comment as he had directed a question to you?
Yes, well, it goes really back to what Carl was saying at the very beginning, that when a person becomes mature, frequently they will, in a Muslim culture, in older Muslim culture, I should say, will be married off. But that, I don't think, is part of the discussion in relationship to sexual abuse. It's just that that's what the culture is.
Although from our perspective, it is abuse.
Well, yes, but it's also a marriage, of some kind. It might not be the type of marriage that we know, but the intentionality, at least here, is a marriage. Not that I'm saying that I agree with that, but that's certainly the way it's understood.
And that's where morality and mores and values all come to play when you talk cultures and cross cultures. Someone moving from that environment into another, don't you believe, would have to be respectful of what is expected in that culture? Rabbi Ofsire.
I would think that part of the larger perspective would be knowledge, maturity, and equal power. In a kind of secular expression of what would be necessary for sexual relations to be licit. I would use the word licit, and by definition, as far as I'm concerned, that becomes impossible between a child and an adult. There is no equal
Sharing.
Basis.
There is no equal basis of any kind when indeed we are speaking about a child and an adult.
All right, thank you very much. Now, many churches have made some headway, of course, as we've heard. There are child screening programs that many churches have put into place. Would anyone care to describe that in terms of your perspective and maybe where you come from, your church or school or whatever? I would assume that there is a screening process that is brought to bear when you're having volunteers come in and or employees. Carl, Dr. Treball.
Well, I mean, when we hire someone at the university, everyone has to go through the application process, interview process, but we have a background check done on everyone, and of course, for a first-time person, that's not going to. It would be impossible to catch that. But if there's any kind of history that would suggest this, I mean, it's just absolutely not. We're not having that person in the classroom. So, I mean, and that's a fairly standard procedure in universities. And I think it would be really important that any church that has a daycare, any kind of teaching of children, working with children, maybe even in our church as Sunday school teachers, seems like it would be a way to protect children.
The Episcopal Church requires that.
Yeah.
Just a few seconds. then.
California
And
state law requires that as
self-preservation,
well.
much
so.
of it is done.
You were saying about for
I was just
self-preservation?
saying that much of what is positive is done for self-preservation when the institution realizes that if we're responsible for someone who goes against what the law is, the institution will be the ones that will suffer.
I'm afraid that's all the time we have for this segment. This went by pretty quickly today, but there is an important announcement I'd like for you to hear. We'll be back in just a few moments.
Thank you, Pastor Lutz. We hope you are enjoying today's program. If you would like to learn more about the American Religious Town Hall, please visit our website at americanreligious.org. That's americanreligious.org. There you can read about the mission and history of the program, learn about the Town Hall estates, and view past programs by clicking the appropriate menu buttons. Each week, Pastor Lutz looks forward to receiving your letters. You may write to him at the address shown on your screen. Send your letters to Pastor Jerry Lutz, American Religious Town Hall Meeting, P.O. Box 180118, Dallas, Texas 75218. That's Pastor Jerry Lutz, American Religious Town Hall Meeting, P.O. Box 180118, Dallas, Texas 75218. Thank you for writing, and thank you for watching. And now, back to you, Pastor Lutz, and today's closing statements.
Thank you, Mark. And I do look forward to hearing from you. I hope that you do drop us a line. And there are some programs that are archived on our website that you can look at, and tell your friends about it as well. We do a lot of different subjects here on the American Religious Town Hall, and I know that you have ideas too. We'd love to hear from you about those. Let's go now to our summary statements, and for that we begin with Father Skeldon.
Well, thank you, Pastor Lutz. I think it's clear that all of us are in agreement, and that, sex and the expression of sexuality is a gift that is to be between consenting adults, within the confines of marriage, as my religious tradition would understand it. In particular, sex between an adult and a child is a form of abuse that must be categorically condemned.
All right, thank you very much. And then Canon Peterson, your summary, please.
Yes, I would argue that sexual abuse of anyone is bad. But what the statistics are telling us is that it is the family and the family friend who has to be far more diligent when so many sexual abuse cases are of children. 90%, as I said, of the abuse cases are known by the abuser or the abuser's family. I believe that it is the church or any place of worship, the synagogue, the mosque, the temple, needs to bring this topic to the top of its list of concerns. This is scary because I think that it is human nature to trust friends, to trust members in one's own community. But maybe we cannot be as trusting as we would like to be, even with friends at church, schools, or at recreational centers.
Thank you very much. And now, Dr. Robeck, your
Yes.
summary.
This is not a uniquely American problem. It's a universal problem. It's a human problem. It's not uniquely a religious problem. It is both religious and it is secular society as well. Sex between adults and children is not sex. It's perversion. It's taking advantage of people who shouldn't be taken advantage of, and it leaves lifelong hurt. I think we're right in condemning it.
Thank you. Now, Dr. Trovall, your summary, please.
Well, and I condemn it too, and in our tradition, it's just, it's terrible. And I think, though, I want to just shift it and say that if there's any of the people who might be listening to the program today who have suffered this kind of abuse in any way, that it's important that they find a professional counselor, that they find someone that they can trust, because the people you normally trust perhaps want to hide it or keep it away, to not deal with it. It's important that a person reach out. And obviously it's so strange to say, go reach out to someone you trust, and then your statistics say, but you really have to go to someone you really can trust to bring it out, to be in that process of healing, because what's happened is abuse. It's wrong. It's a sin. And the healing needs to begin.
Thank you very much. And Dr. Beach,
Yes,
your summary.
in our topic today, we've emphasized the issue adults versus children. But I think there's another issue we've touched upon, and that is equality of partners. So there's a balance. Otherwise, there is a form of abuse. It may not be child abuse, but it is person abuse.
Okay, thank you very much. Rabbi Offsire, your
Thank
summary.
you. I'd like to utilize the few moments that I have to go back and to amplify what we have learned from Canon Peterson. 90% of all sexual abused people, children in particular, are familiar with those that did the abusing. That's a powerfully important and terrible statistic. And we need, now knowing it, to give much more thought to the possibility, because we certainly can't be exempt from responsibility when we know what the facts are.
All right. Thank you very much. Very well said. And thank you to each one of you for your contributions to today's discussion. There might not have been much disagreement, and we don't always have to disagree when we get around the table like this. It's good to agree, especially on a subject like this. If anything, I hope we've raised some awareness, that we've heightened people's understanding of how severe and problematic this issue is. And I would just suggest to you to talk with your pastor, your rabbi, your priest, whomever it is that is the leader of the organization to which children's lives have been entrusted, to have a conversation about this. And if your organization or institution does not have a training program to make people aware of the problem, if you don't have a screening program, just have some discussions about that, because this is an extremely important subject and a matter that we all are responsible to do something about. So I hope that this program has brought you some clarity and perhaps maybe some new revelations, so that we can do everything we can to work together to stop this kind of abuse. So thank you for tuning in today, but for now, the Charter of the American Religious Town Hall provides that Roman Catholics, Protestants, Jews, educators, and others may appear on this program and can declare their beliefs without hesitancy. And the rest of the members of the panel will uphold and guarantee that American right to all who will appear, irrespective of race or creed, so that the rest of the world can see that here in America we believe in civil and religious freedom, not only in theory, but in reality. So now, friends, until next week, at the same time and over this very same channel, the American Religious Town Hall meeting stands adjourned. And may the God of all of us bless all of you.